The judge's gavel fell like a gunshot. "Mr. Thornton, you have until sunrise to surrender the child." James stood in the crowded courtroom, Joshua screaming in his arms, reaching desperately back toward him as the hired nurse advanced with cold, efficient hands. The baby's cries tore through the silence, raw, primal, the sound of a world ending. "Please," James heard himself say, hating the break in his voice. He doesn't know her. He's terrified. "The law is clear," Judge Patterson said, not looking at him. "Victor Blackwood is the child's blood grandfather. You are nobody. Nobody." The word hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Margaret Hayes gripped his arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "We'll appeal," she whispered fiercely. "Go to the territorial capital, find another judge." But they both knew how this ended. Men like Victor Blackwood didn't lose. Not to trappers, not to love, not to anything that couldn't be bought or buried. Outside, through the courthouse windows, James could see Blackwood's carriage waiting, matched horses worth more than James's entire claim, gleaming brass fittings that caught the winter sun like accusations. Inside that carriage, Joshua would disappear, become someone else's grandson, someone else's heir, someone else's property. The nurse reached for the baby again. Joshua's screams reached a pitch that made grown men wince. "How did it come to this?" Someone whispered in the back of the courtroom. James closed his eyes, holding Joshua tighter, breathing in the scent of him. Milk and soap and innocence. How had it come to this? How had 4 months of midnight feedings and lullabies and love led to this moment? It had started simply enough. Or so he'd thought. It had started with snow. 4 months earlier, late December, a gift in the snow. The gelding balked at nothing. Or what should have been nothing. James Thornton pulled the reins, squinting through snow that fell like ash from a burned-out sky. Late December had teeth in Wyoming territory, and twilight came early this far from town. "Easy, boy," he murmured, dismounting. His boots sank into fresh powder at the Willow Fork crossing. The gelding's ears pinned back, nostrils flaring at something James couldn't see. Then he saw it. A basket half buried in the drift where the creek bent south. Woven sweetgrass, the kind that took skilled hands and time. James's heart kicked hard against his ribs as he waded through snow that grabbed at his knees. Inside, wrapped in a blanket embroidered with initials he couldn't quite make out in the dying light, lay a baby. A boy, he thought, though it was hard to tell through the blue tinge of his lips and the frost gathering on tiny eyelashes. He wasn't crying. That scared James more than if he had been. James hadn't held an infant since his daughter died in his wife's arms 3 years back, since Catherine herself stopped breathing 2 days after, since he'd buried them both under aspens and sworn never to feel that kind of breaking again. His hands shook as he lifted the baby free. The child weighed nothing, everything. His chest rose and fell in shallow gasps, minutes from gone, maybe less. 4 miles to shelter, he said aloud as if speaking made it real. "You won't make it if I'm careful." He tucked the baby inside his coat against his chest, where his heart hammered panic and prayer in equal measure. The cold burned through his shirt, but the baby's skin felt colder. James mounted in one motion, keeping the child pressed tight. The gelding sensed his urgency and lunged forward through the snow. Behind them, fresh powder erased the basket, the tracks, everything. Like the world wanted to pretend this hadn't happened. "Guess you're my family now," James whispered into the wind. Half to the baby, half to God, half to Catherine's ghost. The math didn't matter. He rode hard for home. The baby's cry could crack iron. James's cabin was one room, stone fireplace, bare necessities. He'd let it go cold before riding to town for supplies. Now the fire was embers, and the temperature inside wasn't much better than out. His hands fumbled with flint and steel. The baby screamed, not the angry cry of a healthy infant, but something desperate and fading. He got kindling smoking, then flame, fed it larger pieces with shaking fingers. "Hold on," he said. "Just hold on." He delivered foals, set broken bones on cattle, buried his wife with his own shovel, but this sound paralyzed him in ways nothing else had. Catherine used to heat milk for orphaned animals. He remembered that much. James found a bottle, poured cow's milk from the cold box, held it too close to flame, and burned his hand, cursed, tried again, tested it on his wrist like he'd seen Catherine do. The baby refused it at first, turning his head, still crying. Then hunger won, and he latched desperately, gulping air and milk together. Silence fell like snow. James stood in the middle of his cabin, this tiny creature in his arms, and had no idea what came next. The child was burning up. He could feel fever through the blankets. His breathing rattled wrong. James tried laying him in his bed. The baby screamed, tried the chair, screamed. So he paced, rocking awkwardly, humming hymns his mother sang when he was small. Nothing worked. Near 3 a.m, exhaustion made him honest. "I don't know what I'm doing," he told the baby, "but I won't let you die. That's all I got." Maybe the child heard something true in that. Maybe he was just too tired to fight. Either way, he went still against James's shoulder, his small body curving into James like he fit there. James was afraid to move, afraid to breathe too hard. As gray light crept through the window, he realized 2 things. The baby was still burning with fever, and he needed help he didn't have. The nearest doctor was in town, 7 miles through snow. Questions would follow. Whose baby? Where'd he come from? What was a widowed trapper doing with an infant? He looked down at the flushed face. Didn't matter what followed. The child needed more than he could give alone. James wrapped him in every blanket he owned, rebuilt the fire to last, and rode toward Clearwater as the sun rose blood-red over frozen plains. The bell over Morrison's General Store rang like a courthouse gavel. Every head turned. James Thornton, known for keeping to himself since his wife passed, stood in the doorway holding a bundle that moved and whimpered. 20 townfolk stopped mid-conversation. Margaret Hayes reached him first. She ran the inn, had kind eyes and capable hands. "James, Lord above, is that—" "Found him," he said quickly. "Creek crossing yesterday. Twilight. He's got fever." Margaret touched the baby's forehead, frowned. "Come on." She guided him to the counter, already gathering supplies. "Daniel, fetch cow's milk, the good kind. Emma, get clean cloth for wrappings. Move." People moved, but they watched, whispered. Sheriff Daniel Foster approached slowly, hat in hand. "Good man, fair man, but a lawman first. That your baby, James?" "No, sir, like I said. Found him, basket in the snow. No note, no tracks. Fresh powder covered everything." The sheriff studied him. "You aiming to keep him?" James's jaw set. "Till his people are found." "If they're found. And if they ain't?" Before James could answer, Silas Harper pushed through the crowd. Banker, town council, the kind of man who measured everything by property and propriety. "A single man raising a boy child?" Harper's voice carried. "That ain't proper, Thornton. Territorial orphanage in Cheyenne takes foundlings. They've got women, resources." Something cold settled in James's chest. "He was left in my path. Reckon that means something." "Means someone abandoned him," Harper pressed. "Don't mean you're fit to parent." Margaret Hayes stepped between them. "Silas Harper, this child needs medicine and warmth, not your politics. James is doing what's right." "I'm doing what the law requires," Harper said stiffly. James looked down at the baby, barely breathing yesterday, fever hot today, completely dependent on strangers. "I'm calling him Joshua," he said, voice steady. Seemed right, given the circumstances. The room went quiet. Naming him made it real, made it a claim. Margaret smiled. "Joshua Thornton, that's a good name." She turned to James. "I'll teach you what you need to know. Feeding, washing, reading his signs. You won't be alone in this." Some folks nodded approval, others looked away. Sheriff Foster cleared his throat. "Keep me informed, James. Any news about family, you report it." "Understood." "Yes, sir." As James paid for supplies, Margaret walked him to the door, keeping her voice low. "There was a girl, Elizabeth Blackwood. Left town 4 months back. Timber baron's daughter from up north. She was pregnant, unwed. Nobody's seen her since." James looked down at Joshua, sleeping now against his shoulder. The blanket he'd been wrapped in had initials stitched in fine thread. E.B. His hands tightened on the basket of supplies. "Thank you, Margaret." "Don't thank me yet. This road you're walking, it ain't going to be easy." "Good things never are," James said, and carried Joshua back into the cold. January came in with snow and silence. James Thornton learned more in 8 weeks than in 8 years of trapping. Babies, he discovered, had opinions about everything: temperature, hunger, wetness, boredom. Joshua had more opinions than most. Margaret Hayes visited daily, teaching with patients James didn't know existed. How to wash clothes without scalding delicate skin, how to read Joshua's different cries. The sharp one meant hunger. The building wail meant a wet diaper. The exhausted whimper meant he needed to sleep, but didn't know how. "Talk to him," Margaret said one afternoon, showing him how to fold cloth. "Babies need voices like they need milk." So James talked. Told Joshua about the land, the weather, his plans for spring trapping. Read to him from Catherine's Bible, Genesis mostly because beginnings felt right. "And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him." He read one night. "Even the marked ones get protection, little Joshua." Don't that give a man pause? Joshua stared at him like he understood. Maybe he did. The community began to soften. Women brought baby clothes, hand-stitched blankets. Men nodded respectfully when James came to town for supplies. Even Sheriff Foster admitted, "You're doing right by that child, James. More than right." Week 7. Everything changed. James was changing Joshua's diaper, still clumsy at it, but better than before, when the baby smiled at him. Not gas, not accident. A real smile, eyes crinkling, directed straight at his face. He froze. Then tears came like spring runoff, fast, unexpected, unstoppable. First he'd cried since standing over Catherine's grave with dirt on his hands. "Well now," he managed, voice broken, "guess we're going to be just fine." That evening, Margaret stayed late. They sat by the fire after Joshua fell asleep, drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm. James found himself talking about Catherine, about their daughter who never drew breath, about the 3 years he'd spent half alive. "You were meant to find him," Margaret said quietly. "Some things ain't coincidence." Their hands were close on the table, almost touching. James looked at Margaret like he was seeing her for the first time. Kind eyes, strong hands, a widow, same as him. He pulled back. "I'm still figuring out how to be half alive again. Don't know about more than that." Margaret smiled, sad, but understanding. "That's all right. Joshua's teaching you. I can wait." 3 days later, a letter arrived from Cheyenne. Official seal, lawyer script. James stared at it on his table for 2 days like it was a rattlesnake coiled and waiting. When he finally opened it, the words felt like winter coming back. The letter sat between them like something dying. James had ridden to town, found Margaret at the inn, and handed it to her without speaking. She read it twice, lips pressing thinner each time. "James." "Read it again," he said. "Tell me it says something different." It didn't. Cornelius Ashford, attorney at law, Cheyenne, Wyoming Territory, representing Victor Blackwood, prominent timber baron. His daughter Elizabeth had died of fever 8 weeks prior. Before dying, she'd confessed to leaving her infant son with a good man on the Willow Fork Road. She'd watched James from afar after her father banished her, knew his character, trusted him with her child. Now, Victor Blackwood demanded his grandson be returned to his estate. "He's got lawyers," James said quietly. "Money, blood, claim. What do I got?" Margaret gripped his hands across the table, her fingers warm, steady. "You've got every midnight feeding, every fever you walked him through, every moment that child needed someone and found you there. That's what you've got." "Judge won't see it that way." "Then we make him see it." James pulled away, paced to the window. Outside, Clearwater went about its business. People who didn't know his world was ending. "Tell me about Elizabeth Blackwood." Margaret's voice went soft. "Brilliant girl, gentle, was engaged to a surveyor named William Grant. Good man, no money. Victor forbade the marriage, threatened violence. Elizabeth refused to back down." She paused. "William died in a logging accident 7 months back. Folks whispered it wasn't an accident. Elizabeth fled to Cheyenne the next week. Pregnant," James said, "and heartbroken. Victor Blackwood is a hard man, James. Controls everything, everyone. Elizabeth knew he'd do the same to her baby, so she left Joshua with a stranger. She left Joshua with you." The door opened. Silas Harper stepped in without knocking. "Thornton, heard about the Blackwood letter." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Terrible situation, but family's family. Blood matters." "What do you want, Silas?" "Just offering counsel. Man like Victor Blackwood. He's got connections. Judges, politicians. Fighting him would be—" Harper shrugged. "Unwise. Best to let the child go to his rightful family." James crossed the room slowly. "Get out." "I'm trying to help." "You're trying to get Blackwood's banking business. Now get out before I help you out." Harper left, but his smile widened. You'll see reason eventually." When the door closed, Margaret said, "He's circulating a petition. Concerned citizens asking that Joshua be placed with his blood family." James looked at Joshua sleeping in the basket Margaret kept at the inn. 3 months old now, starting to laugh, recognized his voice, his face, called him in his baby way home. "When's Blackwood arriving?" 1 week. James nodded slowly. "Then we got 1 week to figure out how to fight money and blood with nothing but love." "Love ain't nothing," Margaret said fiercely. "It's everything." Outside, the first snow of real winter began to fall. Victor Blackwood arrived like winter itself, cold, inevitable, unforgiving. The town hall was packed. Every citizen who could walk had come to watch. James stood near the back, Joshua in his arms, Margaret beside him. Sheriff Foster had called the meeting to discuss the matter civilly before courts get involved. Civility died the moment Blackwood walked in. He was 60, maybe older, but hard as railroad iron. Gray beard, expensive coat, eyes that measured everything and found most of it wanting. 2 lawyers flanked him. A hired nurse followed, ready to take the baby. Silas Harper rose immediately. "Mr. Blackwood, on behalf of Clearwater, let me express our sympathies for your loss. Your daughter Elizabeth was—" "Where's the child?" Blackwood's voice cut through pleasantries like an axe. Sheriff Foster gestured. "James Thornton's been caring for him since December." Blackwood's gaze found James, measured him, dismissed him. "Bring him here." "No, sir," James said quietly. The room went silent. "I beg your pardon." "Said no. He's content where he is." Blackwood's jaw worked. "That child is my grandson, my blood, my heir. You've no legal claim." "Got a moral one." One of Blackwood's lawyers stepped forward. "Mr. Thornton, my client is prepared to offer $7,000 as compensation for your trouble. That's more than generous." "He ain't trouble," James interrupted. "He's my son, and he ain't for sale." The room erupted. Half the crowd shouted support for James. The other half argued for Blackwood. Sheriff Foster had to bang his rifle butt on the floor for silence. Silas Harper produced a document. The petition. "I have here 40 signatures from concerned citizens. They attest that Mr. Thornton, while well-meaning, is unfit for custody. He's unmarried, isolated, lacks adequate resources." "He's loved him," Margaret Hayes said, standing. Her voice shook but held. "Every day, every night, every moment he needed someone. That's more than resources. That's everything." "Who are you?" Blackwood demanded. "Margaret Hayes. I run the inn, and I know something about losing children to wealthy relatives who think money matters more than love." She told them, voice steady now, about her nephew, 6 years old, orphaned, placed with a distant uncle who had property and standing. The uncle neglected him, let him die of preventable illness while his money sat in banks. "Money don't make a parent," Margaret said. "Love does, daily, unglamorous, exhausting love. The kind James Thornton's shown every single day since he found Joshua freezing in that basket." The room divided visibly. Some nodded, others looked away. Blackwood stood. "What can you give him that I cannot, Thornton? Speak honestly." James met his eyes. A father who chose him, not a grandfather who drove his mother to an early grave. Blackwood's hand shook for a moment. Something cracked in that iron face. Then it sealed again. "Judge Patterson arrives tomorrow. We'll settle this legally." That night, Judge Patterson, a territorial appointee who owed his position to men like Blackwood, granted temporary custody to Victor Blackwood, pending a formal hearing in 4 weeks. James had until dawn to surrender Joshua. The town emptied. Margaret stayed. "We'll appeal," she said. "Find another judge. Go to the territorial capital." "Margaret," James's voice was gentle, "you know how this ends." She did. They both did. James carried Joshua home through falling snow. The baby slept against his shoulder, trusting, completely unaware his world was ending. He'd buried his wife and daughter with dry eyes. But tonight, holding Joshua while he slept, James Thornton wept like winter rain. The cabin was too quiet. He did everything one last time, midnight feeding, changing him, rocking him to sleep while humming hymns. He memorized the baby's face, the way he grabbed James's finger when he touched his palm, the small sounds he made dreaming. Near dawn, he packed the basket, the clothes Margaret had sewn, toys men from town had carved, the embroidered blanket, Elizabeth's last gift to her son. He wrote a letter in careful script to be given to Joshua when he was old enough to read, "Your mama loved you enough to save you. She chose me because she knew I'd keep you safe till you could be strong. You were wanted every day, every moment. You saved me when I was drowning. Don't ever forget that." He folded it, placed it in the basket beneath the blankets. When Victor Blackwood's carriage arrived, pulled by matched horses worth more than James's entire claim, the hired nurse stepped out with professional efficiency. She reached for Joshua. Joshua screamed, not the normal cry of an upset baby, something primal. He arched away from the stranger's hands, reaching back for James with desperate fingers. The nurse tried to soothe him. Joshua screamed louder. "He needs time to adjust," the nurse said, voice strained. But Joshua wouldn't adjust. He screamed until his face went purple, refused the bottle, wouldn't be consoled, just kept reaching toward James, who stood in his doorway with fists clenched and heart breaking. Victor Blackwood climbed down from the carriage, took Joshua himself. The baby screamed in his arms, batting at his face. Blackwood stared at the child, his grandson, his blood, and something in him cracked. He saw the blanket, the one Elizabeth had embroidered during long nights alone. He saw the basket Elizabeth had woven with hands he'd never noticed were skilled. He saw his daughter's desperate final act of love, saving her baby from him. What would Elizabeth want? James's voice was quiet, but cut through Joshua's screaming. Blackwood looked up. His face was wet. "What? Your daughter. What would she want for Joshua?" The old man's shoulders bowed. "She'd want him raised with kindness." His voice broke. "Not money, not legacy, just kindness. Same kindness I never showed Elizabeth." The sky opened up. Not snow. A blizzard. Vicious. Sudden. The kind that killed travelers. The nurse looked panicked. "Mr. Blackwood, we need to leave now or we'll be trapped." "Then we're trapped," Blackwood said. They spent 4 days in James's cabin. The blizzard raged outside while inside Blackwood watched James bottle feed at 3 a.m, watched him pace with Joshua when he couldn't sleep, watched Margaret arrive through the storm with medicine when Joshua's fever spiked, watched the way she and James worked as partners without needing words. He saw a family. On the 3rd night, Blackwood held Joshua while James cooked. The baby didn't scream this time. Maybe he was used to him. Maybe he sensed something changed. The old man's hands were gentle. Tears dripped into the blanket. "I killed my daughter," he whispered. "My pride, my need to control. I drove Elizabeth away, threatened the man she loved. He died because of me, and Elizabeth knew it. She ran because she feared I'd ruin her baby the same way." James kept stirring stew. "So don't." "What?" "Don't ruin Joshua. Be better. That's what Elizabeth's giving you, a second chance to be the grandfather you weren't a father." Blackwood looked at this simple trapper who'd taught him more in 4 days than 60 years had managed. When the storm broke, Blackwood didn't call for his carriage. The hearing convened on a cold February morning. The whole town packed into the courthouse. James stood without a lawyer, couldn't afford one anyway. Judge Patterson presided. "Mr. Blackwood, you've brought suit for custody of the minor child called Joshua Thornton, correct?" "Your Honor," Blackwood's lawyer began, "my client has every legal and moral right—" "Your Honor," Blackwood interrupted, standing. "I withdraw my claim." The courtroom erupted. Patterson banged his gavel. "Mr. Blackwood, do you understand? I understand that my daughter chose this man for a reason." Blackwood's voice was steady. "Elizabeth knew me. Knew I'd smother her child with control and expectation, same as I did to her. She chose love over legacy. I won't dishonor her final act of courage." He turned to James. "I'd like to establish a trust fund for Joshua's education. No strings. You'll have full custody. I'd like to visit sometimes, if that's acceptable." James looked at this man who'd terrified him, who'd nearly destroyed everything, saw grief, regret, and the first shoots of redemption. "Joshua should know his grandfather," James said. "As long as you remember, you're a grandfather now, not a king." Blackwood smiled, small, broken, real. "I'll remember." Silas Harper stood, face red. "Your Honor, the petition has been withdrawn by its signatories," Sheriff Foster said loudly, "including me. I signed it thinking money mattered. I was wrong." One by one, men and women stood, apologized, recanted. Harper sat down slowly, face pale. Judge Patterson looked at James Thornton, simple trapper, widowed and alone until he wasn't. The court recognizes that family is built, not born. Custody granted to James Thornton. Guardianship formalized. Margaret Hayes gripped James's hand. Joshua, sitting on his lap, laughed at nothing and everything. Outside, as people filed out into winter sun, Blackwood approached. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "No, sir," James agreed. "But Joshua deserves a grandfather, so I reckon we'll all learn together." The old man nodded, reached out carefully, touched Joshua's cheek. The baby grabbed his finger, held tight. "Guess you're my family now, too," Blackwood whispered. Spring came to Willow Fork the way hope comes, quietly at first, then all at once. James's cabin had changed. A new room addition built by men who'd once doubted him. Margaret's curtains in the windows. Joshua's toys scattered across the floor. The basket hung on the wall now, no longer a symbol of abandonment, but of fate's strange gifts. Joshua crawled these days, babbled constantly, laughed at everything. He had James's stubbornness and Elizabeth's gentle eyes. 9 months old, and absolutely convinced the world existed just for his entertainment. Margaret came for Sunday dinner, had been coming every Sunday for 3 months. The town had stopped whispering, started planning a wedding instead. Though nobody had asked if there'd be one, folks just knew. "Read him another story," Margaret said, washing dishes while James dried. Domestic, easy. Home. James sat in the rocking chair, Joshua on his lap, Catherine's Bible open to Ruth 1:16. "Where you go, I will go," he read. "Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people." Joshua grabbed the pages with sticky fingers. James laughed. That afternoon, they rode to Willow Fork Crossing, the place where everything started. James had built a small cairn there, stones marking sacred ground. He'd planted wildflowers around it, Elizabeth's favorites according to old letters Margaret had found. Columbines, delicate purple petals that survived mountain winters. "Your mama loved you enough to give you the best chance," James told Joshua. The baby babbled back, serious as a judge. She was brave, strong, and she's why we're all here now. A writer approached, Victor Blackwood, visiting for the 4th time this month. He came with gifts but didn't overstay. Played gently with Joshua, told stories about Elizabeth's childhood before things went wrong. "Do you think she'd forgive me?" he asked quietly, standing by the cairn. James considered. "I think she already did. That's why she made sure you'd meet Joshua this way, when you were ready to be a grandfather instead of a king." Blackwood nodded, wiping his eyes. "I'll keep trying to deserve it." That evening, back at the cabin, James stood on the porch watching sunset paint the mountains gold. Margaret beside him, Joshua in her arms. Catherine's Bible open on the table inside. Joshua reached up with both hands, grabbed James's beard, pulled himself forward. Margaret laughed. He knows his daddy. James smiled, no longer broken, no longer alone. "Guess you're my family now," he said. "All of you." Inside, the fire burned warm. Outside, the last snow had finally melted. Winter was just a memory now, and spring, at last, was home. The end.